Ambassador Ric Grenell, our senior advisor, and of course, former acting DNI, Director of National Intelligence, is joining us right now. And Rick, I'm going to get right to the situation with Iran because while we launched airstrikes, justifiably it seems like, against proxies of Iran in both Syria and in Iraq, the Biden administration is not only bending over backwards and doing somersaults to try to get a nuclear deal, but let me take it up a step further, and they are willing to lift the sanctions that your administration, when you were there, put in place against the Ayatollah himself. And we've been saying this is not the way you negotiate. This is not strong negotiating tactics from someone that is, and they are our enemy. Rick?
Look, they don't know what they're doing. You cannot be talking and negotiating with the Iranian regime to drop sanctions and at the same time take to the air to bomb their activities. This is ludicrous. Regular people can see that this is inconsistent, and yet inherent in that whole idea of the Iranian regime negotiations is an assumption that you trust the Iranians and what they're saying. You cannot trust the Iranians in negotiations while looking to see that they're spreading terrorism, so much so that the Americans have to go in and bomb in Iraq and Syria the Iran-backed terrorists. And so this is pretty plain to most people. And I would urge the Biden administration to actually look at what the left hand and the far left hand are doing.
To me, what is interesting here is that this is being done to salvage the Obama legacy of this JCPOA. That is they view that as one of their legacy moves, foreign policy-wise. And Colonel Smith, that legacy move, as we've said, and as Rick just said perfectly, the problem with it is it was a bad deal to begin with, only being made worse as we're negotiating for it.
Oh, it is much worse now. There's no way that we can undo the knowledge that Iran has achieved over the last 6 years, nor what are they going to do with the uranium, which is almost weapons grade now. My question to you, Rick, is this. It appears, unless something drastic happens, that Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon. The JCPOA simply delayed it, but what's going on now, the breakout time has been drastically reduced. So if that happens, what do you see as the consequences? How does that change the geopolitical landscape if Iran has a nuclear weapon? Because it appears that the Biden administration is going to facilitate them getting one.
Look, people just need to look no further than our North Korea policy and how trapped we are because of the nuclear programs that the North Koreans have. Imagine the region when an Iran has a nuclear weapons program. I'm not convinced that they are for sure going to get it. They certainly are on the march. There is no question that their motives are there, that they're given money. The Biden team seems to be allowing the Europeans, which again they don't have the same threat assessment when it comes to Iran that we do. The Iranians are not targeting Berlin and Paris as much as they're targeting Washington. And that's just a reality. So we can't allow the Europeans to water down our policy just because we want to get along with the Europeans and we want this transatlantic hug. That is dangerous right now. We are different, and we need the transatlantic alliance to be Western-facing. We need to negotiate with people who understand that we're a Western alliance. And I think that it's one of the reasons why we have Brexit, right? The British decided to leave the EU because it wasn't Western-facing, wasn't following the rule of law on immigration or open borders. And so we need to signal to the Europeans giving the Iranians money will only create more problems, and that this is why the Biden team has decided to bomb Iranian-backed terrorists, because we cannot trust the Iranians. We need to be very clear. And lastly, let me just say, I think the Israelis are watching this very closely.
Oh, yeah. No question.
They will never allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon.
Rick, I was going to say the same. There is no circumstance. We have an office in Jerusalem, as you know. There is under no circumstance upon which the Israelis are going to allow the Iranians to get a nuclear weapon. But that's just going to cause more instability in the region. Now, here's what's also interesting at the same time, Andy, and that is Iran's president's chief of staff is quoted in Iranian media as saying the U.S. has already agreed to lift sanctions on Iran's senior leadership, and the U.S. is denying this. Meanwhile, it's being leaked out that Ayatollah Khamenei's sanctions will be lifted.
Well, I mean, that's probably true, and these back-channel communications are really, probably the true story, that we've already conceded that to them. But I want to ask Ambassador Grenell, because you said something that I think bears repeating and emphasizing. The European view of Iran in the Middle East should not be the American view. Am I correct on that, Rick?
Absolutely. Look, it took the Europeans and specifically the Germans 9 days to figure out whose side they were on in Venezuela. This is a European Union entity that has been moving away from the Western alliance. We haven't moved away. They have. They have decided whether it's Iran, when I was in Berlin, North Korea had a youth hotel in the middle of Berlin, despite the fact that there were UN sanctions to not support North Korean entities and businesses. And so this is a region, the European Union, the Europeans, that do not share the same threat assessment that we do when it comes to Iran, China, North Korea. The list goes on.
And here's what John Kirby, the Pentagon press secretary, said. He said that the airstrikes that the Biden administration authorized the targets were being used by Iran-backed militia groups that have used the facilities as staging grounds to launch attacks against U.S. troops in Iraq. So
I know the exact targets.
Go ahead.
We've been watching them for a long time. This is, I'm pleased to see that the Biden administration recognizes that we have to protect American troops. Now, look, Jay, and I want to say this very clearly, I'm all about America first. I love the fact that Donald Trump brought our troops home and is not starting new wars. I am not somebody who wants to just utilize American power recklessly. It has to be tailored and targeted and only used when U.S. national security is threatened. I think that this is one of those situations.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, when you got attacks being launched by proxies of Iran against U.S. troops, you take action. You did. Well, let me tell you what you don't do. You don't, on the same hand, say, and by the way, Ayatollah, we're going to lift sanctions against you. That mixed messaging in diplomatic circles, and we'll end on this, Rick. We just got less than a minute here. That kind of mixed messaging in diplomatic circles, and I've done diplomatic negotiations, multilateral, trilateral country negotiations. It doesn't work. You've done it. You're an ambassador. It does not work when you mix message like this.
It not only doesn't work, but the Europeans know that we look silly and inconsistent, and they're just, laughing all the way to the bank, because if Europe raises some sort of concern about a U.S. policy, Biden rushes to change the policy because he maximizes getting along with the Europeans more than he does a Western-facing alliance.
All right, Ric Grenell, former acting director of national intelligence, and proud to say a member of the ACLJ team, especially as it relates to issues like this. And great to have your insight. And Rick's got a lot of things posted at aclj.org.